Hello everyone, in this video we're going to be discussing a very hot topic, the Bleach 1000-Year Blood War anime. With me I have the host of two YouTube channels, R2R Productions and then what's the other one? Real Talk?
It's just Real Talk.
Real Talk.
I somehow got that name. I don't understand why, but no one really had it in a big way. I don't know. What's up, man? Thank you for having me on the channel. Pleasure to be here for the very first time. You and I have been talking so long that it seems like we should have already done this by now.
Yes, well, we're both very busy, and I would also like to say thank you for taking the time to do this.
Yeah, of course. I'm glad I had the time.
All right, so let's just hit the ground running. Real quick, what are your thoughts on the actual final arc of Bleach, the 1000-Year Blood War arc?
Okay, so full disclosure for anyone who is listening to this right now, I honestly have not read the arc since Bleach ended just a couple years ago. And funny story about that as well, one of the things that I was doing as that thing was ending, I was in law school, which I know you are in now. I don't know how much you share that in your social media or something, but I know it's kind of popped up on your Twitter. Anyway, I was like in my first semester, second semester or something, definitely like one of those. And I was just binge reading it because I hadn't caught up. I had kind of finished the anime. I wanted to figure out what happened in the Blood War arc because there was so much hype and intrigue around it. And I was just going through it. And eventually I was able to catch up enough to read the final chapter the day that it came out, and I was fully caught up, and I felt very good about that. And in that time, I really felt like I was enjoying everything that I was seeing. Yes, I thought it was truncated at the end. You know, there was too much going on, and they were throwing so much story at you without really any pacing. And that was one of Bleach's best things, I think, as the entire series went on, both in the anime and the manga, is it had incredibly great pacing. Characters, situations, dynamics. It wasn't afraid to jump from one story to the other story where Kubo was having way more fun with this other character, building up a backstory, whatever they were trying to do. It just worked for me. And in that arc in the manga, the more I thought about it in recent years, it's like, okay, I wish that it would have been a little longer. I wish that he had gotten the time to flesh it out more and told the story that he really wanted to tell, because even though some great characters, fights, moments, even some of the best moments in the entire series happen within that arc, it's so quick and it moves from one thing to another so fast that they don't stick out as much as they really should. So yes, it's an interesting story, but the execution is so incredibly poor that I don't know if I look back on it with the same admiration that I did when I first started it and I binged through it all those years ago.
Yeah, I'm pretty much on the same page. My thing is I've noticed along all the big three, the like traditional big three, is it seems like the mangaka had this like mind trick they were playing where they were in this fantasy world where they thought they were going to just like write the same manga forever, or at least the publishers, and like SHUEISHA thought so. And then when the time came when they're like, all right, the story's done, and everyone else was like, no, you're not. And now they had to like write the quote unquote like hyped up final arc, and you read the final arc and you're like, this is kind of a hot mess. I mean, it's the same thing with Naruto, and the vibes are very present in One Piece right now, where the earlier parts are great because it's just like the OG vibe of the show where the character is just on these simple adventures, and then as the show's ending, you have all these like scaled up fights and like the fate of the universe. In Naruto, it was like the pain arc was great, but then we had to like settle everything in the final war. And then that's what I think happened with Bleach, was everything felt good in the previous arc, but then there was still so much to be answered that you kind of had to have that 1,000-year Blood War arc. But then because there was just so much to do in that short amount of time, it felt like a hot mess.
Yeah, but that's the one problem with it. I think more so, and I listened to your talks about Naruto on your channel. Definitely anybody who's listening to this should go listen to those. They're very good, and I'm not even a huge Naruto fan. It's something that I really want to get into, but I just don't have the time or the patience when it comes to that series at all, unfortunately. But the idea of like where it went, not only kind of where y'all landed, but also where so many other people do, is it feels like it drags on for this purpose of being one of the biggest things out there. Like, this can't end immediately. You can't just go from Pain to Naruto and Sasuke fighting each other at the very end and have a general conclusion. We need this to go on for another year or two, so you need the war arc, right? So, And like, I'm just throwing it out what I've heard, not necessarily what I believe, because I obviously haven't reached that part of the anime or the manga at this point. But when it comes to Bleach, though, I feel like the 1,000-Year Blood War arc is something that Kubo really wanted to do. It's just he didn't have enough time to do it. They didn't give him enough time to do it, because at this point, it had been going on for 15 years. People were losing interest, at least in the West. I know that Bleach is still one of the most popular things in the East, especially in Japan. And despite not having a manga or even an anime, it's still selling a whole lot of merchandise, which is crazy because you go to your average anime shop or anything in a local town, if you even have one, and you can find Dragon Ball, you can find Pokemon, you can find everything besides Bleach. And it's crazy considering that was one of the big three. I mean, everyone talked about when we were younger, Naruto, One Piece, and Bleach, and those were the things. And now it seems like Bleach has been wiped off the face of the earth, despite having, at least in my opinion, maybe not the best ending, the best send-off for the series, but definitely something that was interesting and felt like it was a natural part of the story. I mean, obviously, there's no way that you can read that entire arc and think Kubo wasn't thinking about this probably from the very beginning, right? Like, this is kind of where he wanted to end up, and he didn't have to just pull it from his ass.
No, absolutely. And I think although every fan has at least their own personal thing that they wanted to see and it just wasn't there, I'd say Kubo did a good job considering the position he was in and the restraints that he had on him. And I think we're essentially on the same page. We loved it to the extent that it was a satisfying ending for the most part, even though it wasn't like a fully fleshed out story. But again, we have to consider the fact that there are just so many constraints, and a lot of it was forced. And had he been given like, I don't know, maybe like 2-3 more years to do it, it would have been a lot more substantive. But with all your talk about it being one of the big three and all this hype for the anime, I want to transition into our next question, which is clearly, I think it was like a month or two ago, it was trending on Twitter and everyone was waiting for a big announcement for the 1,000-Year Blood War anime adaptation. And then I don't know what convention or news event it was, but it came around and there was silence for Bleach, and everyone was really disappointed. But I want to ask you the question, do you think we even need an anime adaptation, or do you think, like, just based on what we have, fans, like, in the anime community in general would, like, get along just fine? Why or why not?
So one of the things that you were, but when you reached out to me to do this discussion, and just from looking at my channel, even though I haven't posted on that, R2R Real Productions for a very long time, I need to get back into that. But when it comes to just things I want to talk about, real talk is kind of where I'm at right now. Anyway, Bleach is something that I love, and I would be lying, straight face lying, if I didn't say one of the reasons I desperately want Bleach to come back is because I want a real reason to talk about it again, and not just what if this happened, or what if they brought it back, or if they brought it back, should they do this or something, which not to like poo-poo on this entire conversation, but this is something that everybody, myself included, everybody on social media has been talking about for years now. And not without good cause. I mean, people want it to come back. We want as much information of a series that we loved. And if they brought it back, there would be so much nostalgia based around this property that it just seems kind of, I would say, like corporate financial malpractice to not do it. There's so much money being left on the table not bringing back Bleach, especially with how great Brave Souls is doing and all of their merchandise, despite, like I said, not having really anything to push it. There's no loss leader in it. It's just people love it so much that they're willing to buy it. So yeah, I want a reason to talk about it. I want it to come back because I think that there's material there. It's worth adapting, and it would be fun to kind of relive it and watch it week to week. Kind of in the same vein that myself, as well as millions of other people across the world, rewatched Dragon Ball and relived their nostalgia and their childhood with Dragon Ball and watching Dragon Ball Super, the communities that it created, and just the general excitement about what was being put on screen every single week. And that is why I do want it to come back. But in terms of like story, I don't really think that there's a need for it to come back in any real story aspect. The anime itself kind of did its best to tie everything up. It feels like a satisfying conclusion. And before I got into the manga, I was happy with it, but I fell into the manga really just because they said, okay, it was ending in a couple of weeks, or there was hints of it was ending. And I wanted to make sure that I was there when it happened. And that's why I just stormed through so many chapters. You know what I mean?
No, we're actually in the same position because I was also anime only, and then it was a very long time ago, years ago, that I read the manga, and then I stopped, I don't know, maybe a third of the way into this last arc, and then never looked at the manga again. And then it was only maybe 3 or 4 months ago that I was like, all right, I need to finish this. It's Bleach. I can't believe that I haven't done this sooner. I did it, and I was glad I did it, but I was like every other fan, I was like, okay, where the hell was X, Y, and Z? But I'm glad you brought up Dragon Ball Super, because that's a perfect analogy for what we have here. Is we have this IP that people love and adore, especially Dragon Ball, because even in the hiatus of Dragon Ball Super, there is still an astounding amount of fan content that is produced, like not even like weekly, like daily. So considering that, and considering the fact that Dragon Ball, like just the franchise, has not been hurt by that super hiatus, I think it's good news for Bleach. One, because, like we said, there's clearly already a demand from the fans for an anime. And two, I don't think whatever problems people have with the manga would be a problem. I think as long as they market it well enough and they don't have some like gigantic marketing blunder, it will do like at least fine. Like they'll make a profit, whoever gets their hands on it. Yeah. But me personally, my reason for them bringing back the anime is because I think it is the perfect opportunity to take their time with it. Like I wouldn't want to see like a My Hero Academia adaptation where like they do it seasonally. I think we would be better off weekly. But I think it would be the perfect opportunity for whoever gets their hands on it to take a look at the manga, listen to what fans said years ago, and say, okay, this is what was done really well. Let's like tweak it just a little bit, add this here, add this there, so that even the fans who like loved the last arc watch the anime and they're like, wow, this is incredible. And although I haven't read the novels, it's also an opportunity to maybe somehow incorporate the novels into the anime. Have you read the novels or no?
I have not read the novels per se. I have been keeping up with what's been going on, just because I'm a general fan, right? Like I want more Bleach in my life. I don't play Dokkan, but I play Brave Souls from time to time because one it's a better game, but two, it's just more Bleach. I love these characters. I love this world, and I want to kind of live in it as much as I can. And what you said about Dragon Ball is also true about Bleach in a really, really weird way, is despite its hiatus, there is still so much content on it. Discussions, speculation, just general things. I mean, hell, a fan themselves, even though it's taking them forever to do it, but it's generally very high quality, they're making the 1,000-Year Blood War arc on an anime scale on YouTube. So, like, that in and of, like, that's amazing. And yeah, I would love to see them bring it back for those reasons. But as you said, I'm going to disagree with you because they have the story there, because they have so much of the extra content in the novels, and because they can take their time with it. It would be really interesting if they said, okay, we're going to bring it back, but it's only going to be 4 seasons. It's going to be like 25 episodes each or something, and we're going to tell the full 1,000-Year Blood War arc and everything in a much more deliberate manner than just a weekly anime series. I know the content is there. The content is there for years to come, at least a year, if not a little bit longer, to tell the entire story of the 1,000-Year Blood War arc. But considering what happened with it, and I'm sorry, this kind of goes to the point that I was going to make, but I can come up with something else for the third question. But the idea that they're going to bring it back, they need to bring it back with purpose. They need to bring it back with Kubo, and they need to have an outline. And if there's one thing that the anime itself does so terribly throughout its entire run, is when they're not working with Kubo's direction, they don't know what to do. He is the only one who understands Bleach and what needs to be told and how the characters need to be crafted, the story that, like, how the story should be segmented up and all this other stuff. So if it does come back in any way, shape, or form, he needs to be at the center of it. He needs to be the Toriyama of the product itself, and not just the mangaka writing it from week to week, right? Because he's the only one who can.
Yeah, I'm actually going to retract what I said because you bring up a very good point. I think if they did the seasonal adaptation, it would actually, for the reason I said before, it would be better in the long run, because then they could, with purpose, adapt it and tweak it wherever they wanted to. But you're absolutely right. I think Kubo needs to be involved, at least for a good share of the project, specifically because, like you point out, Bleach is very special, and this is overlooked in my opinion. Bleach is very special in the fact that even though it's shonen, it's not like a very black and white universe, especially with the villains in this world, and especially with Ichigo, where it's not just like, oh, I'm going to beat all the bad guys, or I'm going to get the One Piece, or I'm going to be the Hokage. And he doesn't just have like this like very one-dimensional goal. And you see him mature and become like a very real adult in the series. So I think they need to put the time and effort into the anime, because if they underestimate the project and they half-ass it, is going to be a big slap in the face to all the fans, especially like you, who are very passionate and just want more Bleach.
See, the one thing I love about Bleach, to kind of jump off what you're saying here, is Ichigo is not Luffy, he's not Goku, he's not Naruto, and going off of what I said earlier with, this is the story that Kubo wanted to tell, he just didn't have enough time to tell it because of the corporate structure of mangas, or whatever he was doing during the 15-year run of the series. His idea of Ichigo, what he wanted, and how it played out, is this guy kind of wanted to understand like who he was, and it's such an interesting story for a person coming of age, like you or I, when we were first introduced to the series and we're trying to find ourselves, obviously for a much younger audience, but it's a much darker story, so it's something that you can age into. Not unlike things that you've seen in other pop culture phenomenon like Harry Potter, for instance, where it's like a very child-friendly story that becomes much darker as it goes along because it's aging with its audience. Bleach kind of did the same thing, but he had an idea of what he wanted to do, and it's very much apparent in the Thousand Year Blood War arc because so many aspects of the story that had been building up for years after at that point really came to a head, and you realize that these characters who have been there all along have much broader, deeper backstories, meanings to them that you never even thought about before. And you see how it all starts to connect. And obviously, like, this isn't something that was just kind of strung together half-assed. It was something that he thought about and something he wanted to put. That was his vision. And I feel like taking the time to fully flesh that out in an anime, taking the time to make sure it's understood and tell all of the little bits that he didn't get a chance to tell in the manga would really help make that story even better.
Right, and I think especially nowadays when there's so much anime and sometimes it can seem like very one-dimensional, I think, like you said, it would need to be seasonal so that they can take their time. It needs to be done with purpose because with so much anime and with it, like, a lot of it being congruent in its substance, I think with a sophisticated show like Bleach, they need to portray what Kubo was trying to get across with the villains and with the conflicts with Ichigo. But I want to transition into the next question, which you already teased, so I'll start it off. The next question is, what one thing, and we can't know for sure what studio would get their hands on Bleach if it ever happens, but regardless of the studio, what one thing would they have to nail for it to do well or at least not be a complete failure? And immediately the first thing that comes to my mind is the animation. People already like the story. People already like the IP. Mm-hmm. People love the characters. I actually had somebody on Twitter today, a few hours ago, bring up as an example to this kind of problem. They said, in a question, it was like, which do you care more about, story or characters? And they're like, well, if you look at Bleach, some people say the story isn't that great, but we all love the characters. So obviously people already love Bleach, so the story wouldn't be the problem. The fights are freaking incredible, so that's not the problem either. The music, like, they don't have to have, like, friggin' John Williams writing the music. It just needs to be good anime music. I mean, if we're being serious with ourselves, it doesn't need to be, like, a modern era like composure. It just needs to be like good anime shonen fight music. My one thing, which is the death of all anime, is the freaking animation. And there is no better example to this than the 7 Deadly Sins. If you look at your phone even once in the last like half year, you will see that the 7 Deadly Sins latest season has been plagued by not bad, not poor, abysmal, like grade school level animation. Like, I actually thought someone was joking. I thought it was a meme when I saw this. And then when I realized like this was like not a nightmare, like this was happening, I was like, how does such a good manga get so shafted? And then, like you said earlier, you brought up that like fans are working on their own like fan-made Bleach anime. There are fans who have done their own animation of the big fights in the manga in 7 Deadly Sins, and it looks exponentially better than the actual studio-backed like animation of the fights. So I really just think if they just don't, it doesn't even have to be like Studio Bones level quality. If they just don't mess it up, I think the anime will do wonders. But my question to you is, what one thing, if you didn't already touch on it before, if you did, maybe just something else, some other concern. But what one thing do they have to nail?
When it really comes to Bleach, I think that anime is something that I like. Bleach has always had superb animation, not anime, but animation. It's not something I've ever really worried about, and it's something that I feel like they're not going to drop the ball on. I did already say that I feel like bringing back Kubo in a very creative force. Like, okay, this is what you did in the manga. You had enough time. It's been years now. You can come back. You can tell the story the way you wanted to tell it, and we're guaranteeing you like at least one season to kind of set up the story, maybe 2 seasons or whatever. You touched on at the very beginning here, and I just wanted to like go back on it because this is something I've talked about before, and I know this is kind of ridiculous, out of the reach. Like, this isn't going to happen at all. But, and hear me out, because we've already talked about there's such a huge market for this. I mean, look at how much stuff Bleach is selling in comparison to everything else, despite it not having any real lifeblood being pushed into it over years. People like this stuff, and it's something that in a nostalgia-driven culture, people will gravitate towards in mass numbers. Even just in a curiosity sense, like they're bringing back this show that I used to watch, or I know about from my childhood or something. I want to do this. Maybe big-time fans have kids now. They want to show them to their kids, whatever it is. I really think, you kind of talk about Seven Deadly Sins, it would be interesting for a company in the US, considering how big Bleach used to be here, to be like, hey, we will co-finance this with you, so it's not a huge risk for a Japanese animation company to produce this and then have exclusive streaming rights on one service or another, be it Netflix or Prime, probably not Disney Plus, but maybe Hulu, Apple TV, as crazy as that is. I mean, I know that Netflix and Hulu and Prime have been fighting over in their little corners about who has the most original content in terms of the anime market being shored up for the last several years now. So there's definitely something to that. And you also have Crunchyroll and Funimation, whatever. So bringing all of that back and making it an event level reboot, reimagine, whatever it is, revival of a series that people know and love, that has a marketing potential, at least to me, despite the fact that I'm not one of those people in the back rooms making deals and crunching the numbers and looking at all the charts and everything. Obviously that they do, and if they haven't done it already, I'm sure that there must be something that I'm not seeing, but I'm just kind of spitballing here. When it comes to what I want to see from the anime itself, I would love, not only for better animation in Kubo, but the one thing I think they need to nail is that additional content. The idea that, yes, the 1,000-Year Blood War arc is a really great idea. These characters, these situations all coming to a head, but very clearly being rushed by whoever was in charge, that this is going too slowly, we need to end your manga, and this is something that the red tape bureaucratic system of this industry wants to shore up so we can move on to other things that we think are going to be bigger. Lo and behold, that didn't really happen, but they need to flesh it out. So whether it's weekly or seasonally or whatever it is, they can't just simply look to the manga and be like, hey, this is a story primed and ready for direct adaptation in the same way that maybe Bleach was during its heyday, or something like Dragon Ball was when it was going on, or One Piece or something. Like, as strange as it might be, if you have Kubo, if you have good animation, you have that nostalgia-driven market building anticipation and excitement for new content in the Bleach universe, you need to have them sit down and come up with quote-unquote filler for the series that will flesh out some of the great concepts that were introduced in that arc and give us a very satisfactory conclusion to the entire series if they decide to bring it back.
It still baffles me that this hasn't been done yet. I mean, I would understand if they made a public statement. I don't follow like whoever is in charge of that. I don't know if there has been a statement, but like it still baffles me that this hasn't been done yet, because like we've been talking about, there's a very clear demand for an anime adaptation. Like, it would be one thing if we were pitching it to whoever's in charge, like, look, they really like the anime in the 2000s. I know the 2000s were like some anomaly of human civilization, but like, if we can just like get the money for this, like, you'll make your money. But like, fans are literally asking for it. And in a world where there's only one other contender for like a big Shueisha Toei animation anime, which is One Piece, and there's like a million other anime, again, it wouldn't be a marketing problem. It wouldn't be like a competition problem. Fans are literally asking for it. I truly don't understand, like, unless like they were like saints at these boardrooms and they're like, look, we just don't want the project to be like poorly handled.
Look, we just don't want to make money. I mean, like, it creatively it was done. Like, right? Like that's not reality.
No,
that's
reality is, for whatever bizarre reason, they're like, yeah, we just don't have an interest in it right now. It's just not us. But
yes,
my
like I said, not to interrupt you, but like I said, I trust them to a certain degree, and it's harder and harder to trust them when you see like numbers trickling out where you're like, they must hate somebody, or they see something that we're not seeing when it's selling this much. And the same thing with Dragon Ball is like, why are you letting this die? Like, why are you letting the audience move on to something else? People, this culture is not willing to stick around. Yes, there are still diehard fans, a lot of them, for all of these properties, right? But the longer it goes on hiatus, the more people forget and move on, right? It becomes a memory, not something that you're anticipating. So I don't get it. If the numbers are there, if you can justify it, if they could justify it, and maybe that's the kicker here, is if they could justify it, it would have already happened. But maybe they can't, or maybe they're just stubborn.
Yeah, there's got to be some stubborn reason, because, I mean, again, when these were all big contenders, the big three, it was the 2000s. Anime wasn't as big. Fast forward to 2020, you have, like, you can't even, okay, maybe you can literally count it on your hands, but, like, there are so many streaming websites. It's so much easier to get your hands on anime and watch it in one sitting. So it's, like, so easy for fans to get it if they just put it out there. But I don't know. I sincerely don't know, because like we said, it's not like they're like diehard Bleach fans and they're like, we just want to make sure it's handled right. We don't want Kubo's message to be misinterpreted. I think the problem is there's some jerk who's like, yeah, I've got my Kimetsu no Yaiba and my Dragon Ball superheroes cash cows right now. I don't really feel like putting money on Bleach. We'll get to that hurdle when we get there.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely correct. I mean, I'm not entirely sure if that's what they're doing here, but it feels like something that they would do.
So my last question for you, and this is specifically for you. You have a video where you talk about this issue of like, where the hell is Bleach? And you bring up an interesting idea, which is, if they do bring back the anime, they should do some sort of time skip where the story is substantively the same, but all the characters are, I believe you said, like maybe a few years older. What I want to ask you is, do you still agree that they should do a time skip? Why or why not?
Yeah, this is something I felt very strongly about when I did that video. I was just thinking about it one day, and to be fair, I know Bleach is one of those stories where it's about Ichigo, it's about him growing up and him kind of figuring out who he is. It's trying to emulate or kind of give a window of, I don't really know. Like it's trying to give a window to the audience who is reading the manga, right? Like this kid is like you. He's just kind of a normal kid. He's not Naruto. He's not Goku. He's not anybody else. Like, what does he really believe in? What is he willing to fight for? All of this other stuff. And that's why, at least to me, he is so instantly recognizable and such a fun protagonist, especially in comparison to all the other people who, who are in these fantastical situations. Not that Ichigo isn't, but I feel like he's the more grounded of the big three, or Goku, or, anything in Fairy Tail, or just any other big anime that you can think of outside of maybe Yu Yu Hakusho is also really fantastical as well. But anyway, but the reason I thought that they should really do a time skip is because at this point, as I said before, the anime ended in a very satisfactory way. It's not like they just left it hanging. It felt like a real ending. And one of the biggest things you could talk about with the Fullbring arc, or the Wakamundo arc, or the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, is whenever Kubo ends like a major arc in his stories, it's like, oh, like I could just stop listening altogether because like I got what you were trying to go for, and it's totally fine. Like, it's a great story and I feel satisfied, but it just keeps going. So I thought, like, maybe because it's been such a long time since we've seen these characters, that if they were going to do a bit of a revival, it might be better to take these characters and this situation and update it for the time skip that we have had in real life for these characters. And it's not something that I think the world over people couldn't recognize. I mean, by the time we were done with the anime, like, Ichigo was like 16, 17. I don't know. Like, I know he was young, but at the point where they're going to bring it back now, whether it's seasonally or week to week, that's going to be 7, 8, 9 years. And it obviously people have been really anticipating, really wanting it. And what if they brought it back? He is in his early 20s, the same age, or roughly the same age as everybody who is going to be watching it, who remembers when it was airing live, or being rebroadcast in the dub format. And now this character is updated. The story itself is updated to kind of correspond with that age range. And I feel like it speaks to the generation and the fans who grew up with it and really want to see it come back. And it opens up the door for them to not only revisit everything that came before, but also go back and maybe explore the original stuff, show it to their children, and give them a reason to be excited for the new stuff, more than just simply, oh, it's back. It's not just simply back. It's Ichigo is now roughly my age in dealing with the things that I'm dealing with on a day-to-day basis. You understand what that means? Like, what I'm saying here, I feel like I'm ranting and raving because this is a very long video, but yeah, like that's how I felt.
No, I actually think you make a very good point, because when I finished the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, I loved that we got to see Ichigo's family and how everyone settled down and how they had the kids. And then even before that, like before the 1,000 Blood Year War arc, I loved seeing that they aged just a bit. And with any show, you like to see that the characters grow both physically and like emotionally, because you invest all this time into the show. So especially with like the big three, where they're so long, so you spend so much time with them and they become a part of your life and your habits. It would be great to have a reminder that even because of this, or even despite this hiatus, this is something that is still very much a part of your life as a fan. So you're going to have like this literal physical reminder that this is your family and they're still growing up with you. So I think it's a great idea. We can nitpick how exactly it should be done, but at the end of the day, I would love to see that.
No, yeah. And I know a lot of people, there were a couple people on my initial video who thought that the idea was a bad idea because I think there are just a lot of people who think if you're going to do an anime adaptation, you have to be you have to adhere to the manga in the best way possible. And I just don't think that that's true. I feel like you need to do the best thing that serves the story and the audience who is going to be watching it. And Bleach offers up a very interesting perspective where, because of this time skip, or literally because of the amount of time in which the anime has been off air, it offers up the opportunity to do the time skip. And where the audience who was watching it week to week or whenever it was airing, when it was fresh and new, they've grown up in the same way that you can age up your characters, and it feels much more relevant. I mean, it goes back to your third question, what is something that they have to do? I feel like this is something that would endear it to fans, especially the long-term fans, for a much... and it would also kind of put it in the exact same ballpark as Boruto or something else, where you see Naruto completely grown up. Maybe Ichigo doesn't have a kid now, but he's not like he's not and never has been a normal protagonist in an anime series. Like, he's not somebody who gets married and has a kid like literally right out of high school because they've already like saved the world 14 times and he's grown up so he can have a kid and all this other stuff and move on with his life and literally be at the age of retirement or whatever at the age of 30 and everyone thinks he's an old man. Like, you have a kid who's like 25 years old or something at this point, and he's still trying to find himself. He's still trying to look for those answers in something. And I think it speaks to a lot of people in our generation and Generation Z and the millennials and stuff to have a character who's like that and that they can see themselves in, and not just, oh, I'm a 16-year-old kid. And it's like, well, that's yesterday's news, especially when you're thinking about a story that was started like literally nearly 20 years ago, right? So, yeah, that's kind of my stance on it. I think it would be better for the story.
I can understand why fans don't want an anime to change anything. Like, there's some sort of like rare breed of like anime fundamentalists. Like, if you change even the slightest thing, you ruined it. It's totally wrecked the manga. And what I would like to say to those fans is, look, I hear you. I love the show too, but you can still love the manga and not like the anime. And I think for any studio that does an adaptation, they need to experiment and they need to somehow supplement the story that they're adapting. And a good example of this with newer anime is Dr. Stone. It's not like hugely popular, but if you watch the anime and you like read the manga while you're watching an episode, the anime itself is great. But if you compare it to the manga, as far as the animation, it is essentially, like, especially in the fights, it is essentially like a cut and paste from the manga to the anime. And while manga readers are like, great, awesome, I love the anime, people who like aren't as like stuck up, or people who are only watching the anime are like, where's the animation? Like, where is the like full studio money animation? And again, it's like, I understand that you don't want to see them like tamper with your precious manga, but at the same time, the whole point of an anime is for it to be an adaptation. So whoever gets their hands on an adaptation needs to consider the source material and be like, all right, look, this is what happened in the original source. Now, how are we going to enhance this experience? How are we going to reward the people that are coming back? And how are we going to reward new fans for taking the time to watch this?
I completely agree with that. I agree. I feel like being a purist, a gatekeeper, or whatever you want to say for a certain segment of fans, really it's very potent. I know that this can cause a lot of bad discourse between people because everyone has their opinions on how certain things should be told. But there is an opportunity here where they can do something a little bit different, something that we haven't really seen before, and tell a story that appeals to a broader group of people, especially with where they left off and how much time they've taken in between and just everything in that sense. I want to see a time skip for that reason, but I also want to see them, if they decide to bring back Bleach in any way, to not only do a seasonal format where it's structured, it tells a genuine story. You have Kubo at least in the co-pilot seat, telling them what it is that he wants them to do, and not just working off the manga itself, but fleshing out the story in the best way possible. In hindsight, you were doing it week to week, man. Like, take some time, think about it. I'm sure he has. He wishes that he had told the story differently or something. It doesn't have to be a strict adaptation of everything that was put onto page, and you can hone a different story, a different ending, a different narrative that takes place over the course of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seasons at the very most. And you also have enough time to do the novels and just everything else that we've talked about here. And it's just, to me as a fan, that would be the most exciting thing ever. Like, just to see Bleach come back in that way. And I know this is highly idealized and probably never ever going to happen in a million years, but I can only imagine the excitement. And I think it would bring out so many people from the woodwork. People who have hated on Bleach for years, people who still hope and wish and cross their fingers for it to come back, and people who have been covering it, and just everything. Like, the community would bring itself together, and you would realize once and for all, for literally the first time in a decade, why this was considered one of the big three. Because I think that the love is there. It just needs to be given enough of a push for people to come back in waves and really show everyone just how popular this series is and how much people remember and are very nostalgic about it, to buy the content, to consume it in the most efficient way possible.
I couldn't agree more, and it is just occurring to me. I feel like we need to address the fact that realistically, I'd say like maybe 90% of anime fans don't sit in front of their TV or their laptop with a glass of wine by a roaring fire and consider the moral substance, or oh, I really like the choice you made. I like the choice. I like the aesthetic choice you made with the character. I really love that. I don't think most anime fans are somebody tweeted about it yesterday, and I really liked it. Somebody was like, you don't have to be a critic to enjoy a show. And it's well, I mean, you don't have to be a critic, but I think the way you get people to watch your show, and the way you get those Crunchyroll awards, and the way you get people to look back on it as a classic, is specifically with an anime, is you take the already great manga and you go, okay, this is what people liked. We're not going to touch that. Now this is what people didn't like, or this is what people wanted and it just wasn't there. How can we give fans that? How can we say, look, we all love this, but let's make it just a little bit better? And I think that is what they need to do for this to be a worthwhile project.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. And, for the sake of time and not to make this video an hour long, I will stop my criticism, or not criticism, but my opinions there, because I'm sure we could talk about this for hours. I mean, one of the problems that you are going to have if you ever invite me on to talk about Bleach again is I don't get enough times to talk about it. So when anybody ever really mentions it, I want to kind of delve into it and do my best to kind of articulate why I want it to come back, why I love it, and what I feel like would make it the best possible comeback possible.
Of course, and if I thought it was a feasible effort, I would put out a 3-hour video of us just ranting about Bleach, but you make a perfect point. We do need to wrap this up. So, Real, before we end this video, do you have anything you want to get across to those loyal, patient, amazing people who have sat down and watched this entire video?
First and foremost, like, if anybody has listened to this, and I'm sure there's a handful, thank you so much. That's the one thing about YouTube that I absolutely love, is that there are people who are willing, they want to hear the conversation. It's more of a podcast like thing. They're here, they're sitting here, and they're listening. So thank you so much for that, on your channel, my channel, whatever. Like, that's the bread and butter of YouTube. And if we're willing to sit here and talk about it, there are people willing to sit here and listen and share their thoughts and opinions in the comments. And those are the people that I truly look for, and the people that I see time and time again that I always admire. And people not unlike yourself, who came on my Twitter and stuff and interacted with me and showed that, like, hey, like, I appreciate your opinion or whatever. So, like, yeah, like, this is what you get when you have me for like an hour. Like, I go into these long rants. But no, thank you so much for everybody who's listening. I hope everyone is having a fantastic day. And whether it's my channel or Sal's channel or something, like, it's obviously so, we're grateful for the time that you spent with us today, just listening to our thoughts and hopefully sharing yours as well. And I'll be in the comments section of this video, checking out all the comments and then replying to you guys as well.
Real, I want to thank you again for taking time to do this. I want to thank you to everyone who has taken the time to listen to our discussion, whether it was 2 minutes, 20 minutes, the entire almost an hour now. Neither of us would be here if it wasn't for the fans who wanted to hear these discussions, and I wouldn't be here if I didn't want to try and really like challenge my own opinions on the content. So we're going to wrap this up. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. Comment below. Like Real just said, he's going to be commenting as much as he can, and the same goes for me. I really want to hear what you guys have to think about Bleach, about the manga, about a possible anime. Guys, thank you so much for listening, and both of us hope to hear from you soon.